If you have seen the stories from our trip to Vietnam in the fall of last year, you might remember hearing from retired Marine Corps Major Chuck Casey. In case you haven't seen those stories, the main purpose of that trip was to go to the location where Medal of Honor recipient and Marine Corps Sergeant Rodney Maxwell Davis was killed in action in the American War in Vietnam in September of 1967. Major Casey was one of the organizers of that trip. I left the Marines 25 years ago, so when I went on the trip, it had been a long time since I spent this much time around military officers. What I noticed about Chuck Casey is that everything he did was very detailed and thoughtfully organized. And at the same time, he had this calming presence in every interaction. There's a book about the historic Battle of Hue City in Vietnam called Hue 1968. In that book, the author describes one Marine Corps officer as having a, quote, quiet dignity. When I read those words, the person I thought of was Chuck Casey. So with that, let's get to the show. In this episode, you'll hear two separate conversations. The first conversation happened a few days before our trip to the site where Sergeant Davis was killed in action. The second conversation happened the day after our visit to that battle site. I'll make it clear during the episode when we make that switch from the first conversation to the second conversation. My name is Josh Roe, and this is Tomorrowtown, Tennessee. You're one of the few in this group that I don't know a lot of backstory on. So kind of tell me who you are and you know, how you arrived at this place in time.
Yeah, so my name is Chuck Casey. So I recently retired from the Marine Corps, but how I ended up here was I was a foreign area officer for the Marine Corps, FAO we call the program. And basically it's a DoD program to have kind of regional experts, you know, across the globe. And so I was fortunate enough to have Vietnam as a country of study years ago. In 2010 is when I got selected into the program. So over the course of about the last 10 years, I ended up living in Vietnam for about a total of 6 years. And a big part of my work when I was on the embassy team was, it was two things, kind of the Paul Mill work, political military work, bringing our countries together in the policy environment and strategic environment. But I was also very involved in the legacy of war, reconciliation work, just helping our countries overcome the challenges of the past in areas like dioxin remediation or unexploded bombs or veterans exchanges, missing in action, all those types of issues. And so leading us to today, I received a call in 2018 from then Colonel Jeremy Bowling to bring back a group of veterans who were veterans from the Battle of the Hamburger Hill. And so we worked together on that, and the project and the experience was just so powerful that really cemented in my mind how important and powerful this work is. So about a year ago, when John Hollis mentioned that he had, or I guess I got to know him and talked about the work that he had done with the book with Sergeant Rodney Davis, on a whim, I proposed if he was ever interested in coming back to Vietnam, I'd be happy to facilitate that. And that off-the-cuff comment turned out to what we're doing this week. Yeah. So,
what have you, I guess, learned based on that Hamburger Hill situation and then beyond the other work as well? I talked to a lot of Vietnam veterans, you know, in my work, and boy, it's there's a lot there that a lot of healing, you know, just among, you know, the ones in the States, beyond, you know, the global idea, you know. What do you hope to accomplish when you're trying to reconcile what you can, rectify what you can?
Yeah, Josh, I guess I'll answer that in two parts. The first question was kind of what did you learn, you know, going into what do you hope to accomplish? And my journey started even before the Hamburger Hill event. So my father was a combat veteran during the war. He was also in the Marine Corps. He was a crewman aboard the Huey helicopters. He was a door gunner and flew combat missions really right out of this beach. He was stationed right here. And they would go up and fly combat missions, you know, every day. And so growing up in the 80s and 90s, with a father who had gone through those experiences in the aftermath of that, which was a challenging time in America, it left a mark on me. And I watched him and his generation, his friends, struggle to deal with their experiences, you know, and it was just a very challenging, very deep personal experience for our family, for many, many American families. And so my first time when I was here, kind of formally assigned here back in 2013, I invited him to come out. I bought the plane ticket, and I told my wife that we were going to buy this plane ticket, and he probably wouldn't get on the plane. You know, it's just, I knew that there was a lot of don't know, a lot of emotion involved in something like that. But he did, Josh. He came over to Vietnam, and the one thing that he wanted to do was he wanted to find an orphanage that him and some of his Marines used to help. They would bring food and stuff from base extra supplies and just give it to the nuns. Probably a moment of humanity during the war. And so we found this orphanage. It's located just down the street still. And so he goes in, and after a little bit of getting to know each other, realizing who they were, this lady that he was talking to, all of a sudden it clicked for her, and she goes, I still sleep on the bed that you guys brought 50 years ago. If it wasn't for the assistance of you and your Marines and what you did for us, we never would have been able to take care of the children. And so he starts crying, she's crying, I'm crying. My wife is trying to translate for all this bubbling goofs. But what I watched, Josh, was I watched 50 years of pain and guilt and emotion, 50 years come off his shoulders. And he, from that day, was just a changed man, was just fundamentally different. And so it made a mark on me, and it gives me shivers right now talking about it. And so over the years since then, I've been involved in multiple veterans exchanges and helped facilitate veterans who've been willing to come back. And every single time, it's been the same way, just this emotional release. These veterans who carry just so much pain from the wartime experience. And the war experience, Josh, you're a Marine, you know this, just war makes good human beings do things that they never thought they were capable of. And they live with that guilt for many years after. And it's the guilt of what they did. And it's the guilt of thinking that the people are left with all this pain. But when they come back to Vietnam, what they find is, look around. What they come and see is a energetic, thriving country. And kids today who are building their lives have a much better tomorrow. It's just this energy. And so they come here and they see that. And they see a population who doesn't harbor animosity. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Just more than 90% of Vietnamese view America positively. So the veterans are greeted with that, and just all of this, these years of pain that they kept aside just dissipate. And so tying into your question about kind of the Hamburger Hill event, it's probably just another personal example we saw of that. And Colonel Bowen may have talked about this, but one of the gentlemen who came on the trip, was a combatant, during this heavy combat that he saw as a young man, and was just a very gruff individual, for the rest of his life. Even when he came on the trip, was just very, very gruff. But when he reached the top of Hamburger Hill, 50 years later, and just the emotional release that it was able to bring to him, he left a changed man. And he ended up passing away a couple years later, unfortunately. But his family messaged to us that when he returned to the United States, he returned a different man. He returned the man that they always hoped and somewhere deep inside knew that their father could be, but never got to see. Well, they got to see him. His last remaining years, he returned back just a changed man. And so as he passed, that was the man that the children, the family now has the memory of. And it's incredibly powerful. And so I could talk a year off all day long, Josh, about these experiences, but that's what I've seen. That's what I've learned. So what I hope to get out of this is maybe just awareness. Just there's still a lot of families back in the United States, both veterans, but also the children, kind of the next generation. People are just curious about what is this place? What is Vietnam? And just offer them the opportunity that if they've ever thought about coming back, come, please. We're happy to facilitate it. And especially going to this next year, the 50th anniversary of the end of, the formal end of the war. It's a great time to come and be a part of that. And the last thing I'll say, Josh, is the bedrock of the bilateral relationship. This is more with my old embassy hat on, but this is a strategic relationship. It's grown to a $130 billion trade relationship. 30,000 Vietnamese students study in the United States every year. It's deep people-to-people ties, and it's all founded on trust and respect and mutual gain. And it would be great, again, that the legacy of war reconciliation cooperation is a bedrock of that. But I would encourage veterans to come and see that and be a part of that, and kind of look forward to the next chapter of our relationship. That's, I think, what we hope to get out of this. Yeah.
I know the conversation we're having, I'm sure you don't want to focus it on you, but dang it, how does that make you feel to think about? A lot of us go through life and kind of look back and think, boy, what did I do anything that made a difference? Did I some of the stuff you're doing is pretty powerful for a lot of people. Do you think about that?
I do, Josh. I try to minimize my role in this as much as possible. None of this is about me. I'm thrilled to be in a position where I'm able to and lucky enough to have spent this time in Vietnam, to understand our countries, to also have shared the experience of growing up, the son of a combat veteran from here. I understand that the personal part of it. And so for me, Josh, it's not about me at all. It's just realizing I'm in a unique position to be a bridge for something. To be a bridge for our countries, be a bridge for American families that want to come back, be a bridge for the Vietnamese side to help them understand. That's more of my mentality, my perspective on this.
The story of Rodney Davis, obviously that's kind of what brought us all together. When you hear that story, being a Marine veteran yourself, it's a powerful story, man. It's hard to hear it and not, hit you in the feels. I mean, literally, it gets you a little emotional. What do you think about that story when you hear it, when you know that you're going to be part of spreading it, those kind of things?
Yeah, so a few things right there. I mean, like always, there's so much to unpack, right? The first part, just as a Marine, especially having that shared legacy of the Marine Corps, we like to think that's who we are and that's what our organization is we take our jobs very seriously and we fight very hard when we need to, and we take care of our Marines in any way that we can, whether it's on the battlefield or beyond. And Sergeant Davis just epitomizes that, just in some of the heaviest battle of the war. And to go off in a vignette to quantify that, just there's another veteran that we know who fought in both Operation Swift and Way City. And his comment was, I would rather have gone through 10 Way Cities than one Operation Swift. That's the kind of fierce combat we're talking about. In the heat of that combat, for someone like Sergeant Davis to see a grenade launched and instinctively, there's no thinking, there's no time to think, just instinctively dive on that to save the people around him, just epitomizes the core values that we like to think we're about, that we hold so dear as a Marine Corps. That's the first thing. But I'll share another part with you, Josh. It's interesting, again, more from my Vietnam kind of strategic lens, maybe to share with people about what this relationship is kind of about. What I realized my time as a Marine attaché in Hanoi is I came to realize that Vietnam has a profound respect. Vietnam has a profound respect for America. We fought a difficult war. But in the aftermath, they saw our conduct on the battlefield, people like Sergeant Davis. They saw how we went back and collected our dead. And they saw how we worked with Vietnam to reconcile and get over cooperate in legacy war challenges. They saw all that. Vietnam also has a profound respect for soldiers in general, just anyone who answers a nation's call. They're able to separate the politics from war. They know that young men and women don't choose to go to war. So they respect people who did. But specifically to the Marine Corps, I realized that Vietnam has a profound respect for the Marine Corps because the Marine Corps took some of the heaviest, or I should say, took some of the most difficult terrain to cover. Basically being south of the DMZ, anyone who came from the north on their way south had to fight through the Marine Corps to get there. And so we fought super hard, as Rodney, Sergeant Davis epitomizes. Just we fought incredibly hard. And so the country of Vietnam, the people of Vietnam, the veterans of Vietnam have a profound respect for the Marine Corps as an institution as well. And Sergeant Davis epitomizes all of that. I mean, his actions that day just epitomizes, it quantifies and validates everything I just said. And that's what I think about when I'm here. And to answer your, I think a question you asked kind of about the first part of that, just, what it feels like. When I went out to the site to make sure that we were going to the right place and the conditions were set for our visit, Sergeant Davis was standing in a grenade crater, a big crater, probably I would think a 2,000 pound bomb based on the size of it, just a big crater. And so you're standing in that spot where that action happened, you feel the vulnerability. You're in this big crater. You can't see the edge of it, but you're in there, hopefully for a bit of safety from the battle coming. And when all of a sudden that grenade came over the edge, he's completely vulnerable. You couldn't get out of that crater fast enough. And again, for him to just instinctively dive on it, I mean, you feel it when you're standing in those footsteps where he stood. It's incredibly powerful, especially as a Marine.
The conversation you just heard there took place early in our visit there. During the week, we went to a dinner with the U.S. ambassador to Vietnam and heard a presentation on U.S. and Vietnam relations. We visited Way City. Our group met with Vietnamese veterans from the war against America. We also went to a center that cares for children with disabilities, many of those children living with conditions caused by Agent Orange exposure in Vietnam. We attended several other events as well, but the primary reason for our visit was to go to the site where Sergeant Davis was killed in action. The conversation you're about to hear with Chuck Casey took place on the day after we went to that battle site and on our final day in Vietnam. And a bit of a heads up here. This conversation was near an area where some of the workers at our hotel were preparing for an event. So you likely will hear some background noise at times.
The majority of our events are come to an end, and it's been an amazing week, and you guys have helped create memories that will last the rest of these folks' lives, my life, everybody's been here's lives. How do you feel? How you doing?
Yeah. I feel exhausted right now. I don't fully understand why, but I feel incredibly proud of what we've done. I feel incredibly humbled that a family would let us into their very, very personal family journey and their story and their deep emotions and let us be a part of that. But I also feel exhausted. Just when you work these reconciliation events, I mean, you're just dealing with true, raw emotion. You're dealing with violent history. I mean, you're dealing with some of the hardest things that human beings have to deal with, and you go all in. I mean, if you truly want to try to support it as best you can and bring closure to the families, you go all in, and you're kind of in that journey with them. And so it's a little bit exhausting after. It's physically exhausting, just as you know from being here, working in Vietnam and traveling in Vietnam, and dealing with the time zones and the drives and the heat, just things we're not always used to. It could be a little bit physically exhausting. But mentally, it's also, you give a lot of yourself when you do work like this. And so, So looking forward to getting back home and getting back with my family and recharging my batteries that way. Yeah.
After the day yesterday, and after the morning yesterday specifically, did you have a vision in your head of what you thought it would feel like, and how did if so, how did the experience match with that?
Yeah, I think so. So I've been doing reconciliation events like this for probably 15 years now here. And some of this started with our family's own journey, having a combat veteran father from here who served here. And so some of it definitely went the way you kind of expect. I mean, the general theme seems to be to propose that people come back here, to kind of help them understand that it could be a good thing to come here, for them to get here and see that Vietnam, see how it is today, see that the country's thriving, see that the people are doing well, like Americans, see all those things. And then all of a sudden culminate in kind of, the moment where they really get the closure that they were looking for. And a lot of times that they didn't even realize they needed. And you can't really prepare for that part. It's similar in that it's kind of a similar, kind of overall experience, but it's just so powerful. It's just raw human emotion that there's no way to prepare for it every time. I mean, when you see somebody who's been holding in so much pain for so many years, 57 years, and all of a sudden in that spot, they allow themselves to just let it out, to feel it and to let it out and cry. You can't prepare for it. So that part is different, and that part is different every time. It's very, very personal.
Going back, I guess before yesterday, you had visited that site before, and so I think you were the one of the whole group that you kind of knew where it looked like, it felt like a little bit, and obviously a different scene yesterday, but still. Two-part question. Number one, tell the story of how you found, how you were able to pinpoint that's the location.
Yeah, that's a bit of a long story, but I think it's worth telling. So the quick answer is, with a lot of great assistance from Dr. Eric Villard, Chief Vietnam Historian at the U.S. Army Center for Military History. That's the easy answer. Eric, I mean, this is life's work, is researching the Vietnam War. So when I gave him some information, he was able to pinpoint the location very quickly. The longer story behind that is my relationship with Eric Villard really stemmed from when I was working at the embassy here years ago, the U.S. Embassy in Hanoi. And after decades of Vietnam being a solid partner in helping find American missing in action, we realized that it was time, long overdue in fact, to stand up a formal program to help Vietnam with their unaccounted for from the war. On our side, to the tune of about 1,500 missing Americans from the war, on their side, hundreds of thousands, if not a million, still not located, still unidentified. And so that was a huge program. And so we started the program. This was circa 2019. Got a lot of congressional support. Senator Leahy was a big champion, as he had been for many, many years, in legacy of war issues here and the relationship overall. And we were able to get a funded program, funded by DOD. And so when we brought on other partners, we brought on people like Harvard University, U.S. Institute for Peace, but also Eric, Dr. Villard, was another colleague that I met and was instrumental in shaping that program, kind of creatively looking at what we could do realistically to make an impact. So long answer there, but again, without the help of Dr. Villard, and really without that journey of helping Vietnam find their missing, we probably wouldn't be able to find this exact location.
I mean, you guys nailed it down to, like, we think this specific spot. It's not just this crater, this side of the crater. It was like, we think this is the spot. That's a very specific thing to do, to go back 57 years to the day when we were there and narrow that down that specifically. That's pretty impressive that you can be that precise with that.
Yeah, it is, and it doesn't always go that way. So, I guess, for lack of a better word, fortunately, this battle took place in a relatively flat area. A place where the farmland kind of meets a village. That geography had been that way for a millennia probably. And so, in that context, and then also, again, unfortunately, but this specific part of the battle took place in what was a crater from probably about a 2,000-pound bomb. In a crater like that, we're talking something about 40 feet across, probably 10 feet deep, is still there. So when you look at the satellite imagery, it's pretty easy to overlay a hand-drawn map from one of the combatants with this area of where this rice paddy meets a village and where there's a massive bomb crater. So fortunately, those things came together and helped us be able to pinpoint this one. It doesn't always work that way, unfortunately. Some people who come back here, some veterans who come back here looking for closure, we're in jungle terrain, some really, really tough terrain, and it's completely different. This is an area where, this resort we're staying was devastated by a typhoon a few years ago when we were here, and it was devastated. And within 6 months, it was back to normal. This is an area where the vegetation grows super fast, terrain changes, and so some veterans don't get that. Some veterans come back here and really want and need to sit in the same foxhole they sat in during a battle. And it doesn't always go that way. And that can be a little challenging. But fortunately for this family, we were able to pinpoint the exact location, and really made it just an incredibly powerful experience being able to do that. For a daughter to be able to stand in the spot where her father passed when she was 2 years old, and hear a recently retired U.S. Army colonel, commander of a combat unit, infantry guy, and a U.S. ambassador whose father was a veteran, and 4 active duty U.S. Marine officers from combat arms MOSs, for her to hear exactly what her father did in his final moments, and how bold and how effective and how brave it was. Again, just incredibly powerful.
It's a gift you're giving those folks that I don't, it's hard to measure that. Like you said, a veteran comes back, I want to sit in the same foxhole during that. Like you said, it doesn't happen every time, but when you're able to do that, there's got to be some kind of powerful feelings around that.
There is, and for me personally, it's just gratitude. It's none of this is about Chuck Casey. None of this is about me. This is 100% about the family. And again, the feeling is incredibly proud, incredibly humbled, incredibly happy that we can offer the family that. But back to your opening question, the real feeling is it's exhausting. It's exhausting because my father was a combat veteran here. He served 2 years as a helicopter door gunner, and it was a tough experience. And his experience going back to the United States after was not a great one. His experience was needing to go back and to bury a lot of those experiences and bury that pain. And you can't do that. That's just not the way the human body works. And so what that means is, growing up as a child, as a son of and a proud son, I'm incredibly proud of my father's service and who he is as a man. But it was tough in the 80s and 90s. That was a time frame where you didn't talk about feelings. You didn't talk about your combat. You just buried it deep inside. And it comes out, and it came out many, many times as a child growing up in that. And so what it means is, back when you asked what it feels like, really feels exhausting, because for me, when I go and help these families out, I'm going to a very deep personal place. It's driven by a deep personal place, because I saw what happened when my father came back here. And I saw 50 years of pain come off his shoulders when he had his moment of reconciliation back here. And he was forever changed after that. Not that it's perfect, not that the pain goes away, but it's different. It's fundamentally different. And I've watched it with him. I've watched it with many, many other families. And so to be a part of these experiences, I do that. I'm willing to put myself back in the situation every time where you can't help but remember your own experiences growing up and what impact that made. It makes you want to work harder. But it's exhausting. It's emotionally exhausting, frankly. But again, I'm humbled to do it. I'm in a unique position to be able to do it after working this relationship for so long, and after speaking the language, and after having a Marine Corps career where this is my job to do this here. So I'm in a bit of a position where I can offer that to families, and it's my honor to. So it's quite a mix of emotions, but it's my honor to do it.
Yeah. We were driving out of the combat action area. And the audio for that was not great. Like there was a seatbelt ding, alarm going off, and we're in a car and shaking. But at the same time, you were asked, Jazz, how you feeling after that? And you're relaying some of that same idea of thinking about your dad and thinking about the struggles related to fighting here, and that was those moments after he walked away, and it was powerful to hear you say that. Just kind of like that's the know you're thinking about the Davis family. I know that, but at the same time, it's personal to you. I think it's personal to all of us who do this in some specific way, some slice. You feel that? It's just like the idea of that you understand why you feel that, and that other people do as well.
Absolutely, Josh. I think you are right. I think the Vietnam War, the American War in Vietnam, which is such a difficult time for America. I mean, on the battlefield, it's as fierce as combat gets. Hard stop. Politically, it was just at a time that's very difficult for America. I mean, it's just everything associated with that war was just emotionally charged, still is after all these years, carries so many different levels of I don't know, sentiment and pain for different people. And so, yeah, I think anyone who's involved in this is drawn to it for similar reasons. Maybe their individual experience is different, but for similar reasons, similar themes. Cares about it in deep ways, and is very, very moved by being a part of it. I would say oftentimes, more times than not, probably permanently changed after from being a part of these things. We get so caught up in our day-to-day jobs and the day-to-day hype of the headlines, kind of whatever gets our attention, especially kind of in social media and 24/7 news cycle, that sometimes we actually don't get the raw kind of human experiences. And when we have them sometimes in that environment, it can be even more powerful. I mean, it just hits you like a truck. And everybody I've known who's been involved in these kinds of events, these exchanges, reconciliation events in general, as a follow-on, even yesterday going over to the Da Nang Agent Orange Victim Center, and just the pure humanity behind these things, it really gets you. Yeah.
You occupy an interesting space on this planet, right? Son of a Vietnam veteran, joined the military, two branches, served here, part of your career. Your wife is from this country, is that right?
She is.
Yeah. And now the work you're doing now, and have been a part of in the past as well. It's interesting perspective, and I'm thinking about it on many levels. I'm thinking about it in the context of the number of Vietnam veterans I've talked to who will talk to me openly about their struggling And how do you think about that? Just the experience you have, understanding the war from being the son of a combat vet, and then personal connection to this place, your family now. I mean, it's a lot. It's an interesting thing to think about and can relate to both ends of that in some very specific ways.
Yeah. No, I think it is, Josh, and it's a good thing. So something we definitely should talk about kind of during this is it's a good thing and it's forward looking, and I'm in a very unique position to look at that. So we'll come back to that. But I think you are right. I mean, it's very unique to be the son of a combat veteran and have grown up in that environment. To then go in the Marine Corps myself, or Air Force first, you're right, enlisted Air Force, then Marine Corps officer. But then to work in the U.S.-Vietnam relationship. I mean, I spent 6 years, working and living in Hanoi, 6 of the last 10 years. And I'm married. My wife was born here. My kids are half Vietnamese ethnically. So it is interesting. It's interesting to be in a position to touch all of that. And at the same time, the forward-looking part. A big part of our work at the embassy was setting the conditions, and not just setting the conditions, but also just really doing it, especially in the 2017 to 2020 timeframe, really growing the relationship exponentially, building the trust, cementing the trust foundation to really do things. I mean, this now is a $130 billion trade relationship. We're the United States is Vietnam's biggest export market. My phone was made here, right? Every state in the United States benefits from the U.S.-Vietnam trade relationship as far as goods imported. 30,000 Vietnamese students study in the U.S. every year. And we like each other. More than 90% of Vietnamese have favorable views of the U.S., and they have for more than a decade. And it's because who we are as human beings, how we want to raise kids, and even back to history, how we fought on the battlefield, how we took care of our brothers in arms on the battlefield, how we go back and reconcile these things, both for ourselves and with a former enemy. And again, looking forward to kind of a prosperous shared future together. That is me, Josh. I mean, I'm such a unique position to have touched all of that, to still, help understand the past, not forget the past, learn from it, deal with it, reconcile it, but also to look towards the future, and help build that and help be a bridge there. It is unique. It's unique, and it's incredibly humbling to be a part of it, and exciting, frankly. I mean, especially as we look forward, the forward-looking part of this relationship, the next 50, 100, 500,000 years are incredibly exciting. So,
as an American country, in a position that America's in, a very privileged place to be, and many things that linger from a war that ended more than 50 years ago. Well, 50 years officially, 49 officially, I guess. From Agent Orange exposure, unexploded ordinances, these things that America caused. Let's just be clear, right? There's more work that needs to be done and should be done. Just your thoughts on kind of the issues that still linger from that.
Yeah, there is there. So a couple of things to unpack, right? Just to quantify the population piece, you're absolutely right. Rough numbers, but population of about 20 million during the war. Leap forward to when you're talking about the work to be done, we're talking about hundreds of thousands to possibly a million still unlocated, unidentified from the war. That's almost 5% of the population at the time. I mean, that impacts every family still today, right? That's one part. So 20 million, going in 1775, approximate numbers, about 80 million people by 2010, and 100 million population now. So the numbers illustrate exactly what you're saying. This is a very young population, but it's a young, thriving, energetic, dynamic population. But you're absolutely right. The country lives with the scars of war on a daily basis. So dioxin, here we are in Da Nang. A celebrating point in the relationship was when we concluded the hotspot remediation at Da Nang Airport. This is 2016, when Ambassador Osius and Ambassador Osius, and at the time Deputy Minister of National Defense, General Nguyen Chi Vinh, have the symbolic picture of them reaching into clean dirt with their bare hands, and their fathers. I work for Ambassador Osius. He has young children. He wouldn't have put his hands in that soil if there was a chance that could poison his kids. So it's celebrated every step of the way, but at the same time, this is an area where that was just a storage site. If you look at pictures of Da Nang from the war era, the mountainside was bare, and it's not naturally bare. I mean, you look at it now, and it's all foliage. That was all the oxen, and so that has crept down into the land where vegetables are grown, into the water that people use on a daily basis, that the animals drink, that they eat. So these are issues. These are issues that will be a part of this landscape and this relationship for a long, long time. Unexploded ordnance, right? The province of Guangxi, that I know very, very well. I've been up there many times. Beautiful province, but more heavily bombed than Germany during all of World War II, and they still find bombs on a daily basis. However, we found ways to cooperate on this, and have had very, very effective cooperation. I forget the numbers, but it's staggering the number of people who died after the war by unexploded ordnance. And fast forward to Guangxi, where unfortunately I think there was an accident last year, but in the years leading up to the last few years, almost nobody has been hurt or died. So effective cooperation, it's not that the issues don't exist, it just illustrates the effective cooperation of community engagement, education, capabilities for actually demining, mapping out where bombs may have landed, all that stuff. Missing in action, both from our side, U.S. missing in action. We still have, to the tune of 1,000 U.S. soldiers still missing in action from here. I should know the exact numbers, and I'm sorry I don't have it, on me right now. And on the Vietnamese side, again, we talked about hundreds of thousands, if not a million, still unlocated, unidentified on their side. And the final part of this is a culture that reveres their war heroes. We saw on the way up to Hue, every single village has a martyr cemetery, and it's always well maintained, always well cleaned. I mean, what a country respects is reflected by the things that they pay attention to like that, and they revere their martyrs. They revere their elderly. They revere their dead. They live with their ancestors. So you saw some of the grave sites in the village that we were at, where Sergeant Davis passed away, and the grave sites are all well kept. People live with their ancestors. There's fresh incense, there's fresh offerings. Then they live with their ancestors, and so in their culture, they can't properly, their belief system, their spirituality, means that they can't properly honor someone and send them on to the next part of their afterlife until they're properly located, identified and interred. And that affects every family. Again, back to my opening comment about 20 million people at the time in Vietnam, and possibly a million of those still unaccountable from the war. It impacts every single family here in Vietnam, these issues. But that's a long answer. What I look forward to, though, Josh, is this has become the fabric of our relationship. Again, as we have a $130 billion trade relationship, and as we have 30,000 Vietnamese students studying in the U.S., all these good things, as we are strategically aligned in issues like rules, international law, those types of things, this work continues. And I think the important thing is to understand that there's really not an end point for this. These issues will go on for a long, long time. If we're able to keep these as a foundational cooperative part of our relationship, both in substance and in symbolism, that's a success story. That's what will keep us moving in the right direction, moving forward. And I think that's the attitude that needs to be taken. It is a permanent part of the relationship. It's just something that the families here will have to deal with for more generations. The physical work of still addressing these humanitarian legacy of war challenges from the war, this will go on for more generations. But more importantly, what I think, and this is, now we're getting to kind of Chuck Casey's thoughts, but I think it's important, is not just looking at through the lens of cleaning up the past, addressing the past, but also moving forward. It is so easy to get into a conflict, to start a conflict or skirmish, or whatever you want to call it, that you think you can control. And the Vietnamese know better than anybody else. Once the bullets start flying, you no longer control it. You don't control how long this conflict lasts, how far it spreads, where it goes, how many years it lasts. And what this country also understands is when the fighting is done, the work of reconciliation and dealing with the aftermath is generations long, generations. And so what I think when we talk about work that still needs to get done is raising that voice in educating others and making sure that we hold each other accountable and our governments accountable, that if we are going to go down a road of conflict or take rhetoric and action that have the potential to lead to conflict, that we really make sure that that is truly the last course of action. Because once the conflict starts, we don't control it, and there will be people like us dealing with it generations after, dealing with the consequences of it. So that's what I think, Josh, when we talk about kind of the work that needs to be done. Still, it's the work of physically dealing with the aftermath of this conflict, but it's also the work to try to use these experiences to make sure we don't repeat some of this history.
Yeah. There were things throughout the week that we did that were like, oh, I'm so glad we did this. The event last night, yesterday afternoon, with the ambassador at the children's home, the event with the Vietnamese veterans, told me stories that I didn't fully understand, or I didn't see the same way for sure. So number one, thank you or whoever decided that was a good idea, because I'm glad we did that, and I'm glad that we captured that and we can show people that. But can you speak? Let's talk about specifically yesterday at the children's home. It was powerful to go and see those kids' faces and see the joy they had, and go out and play some basketball and just doing what kids do, right?
Yeah.
Give me your thoughts on being there yesterday. How that felt, what that meant to you.
Yeah. So first of all, I appreciate all of that, and I appreciate hearing that was value added, and kind of helped with an understanding of who is this country. Vietnam is still a bit of an enigma, for a lot of us, especially as Americans, just with what we saw growing up and what we think we know. Everything's changed here. A couple of things there, right? I mean, the first is what really comes to my mind is it's kind of, to put it bluntly, it's kind of par for the course. The Vietnamese are just such genuinely good human beings who do what they need to when they need to, whether it's working or unfortunately whether it's fighting. And the second those things are done, they're just good human beings. They're good human beings through it. And so what we saw yesterday was a representation of that. A center of 45 children who suffer from disabilities or cognitive disabilities, and just pure human beings. And that's again, that's the bedrock of this entire relationship, is removing all the baggage, removing all the bias, removing all the politics, and just recognizing that we have more in common. And my father used to say this as a combatant. We have more in common as people than we ever had different. How we want to raise kids, what values we subscribe to, how we take care of our children, how we take care of our disabled, how we take care of our elderly, how we take care of our veterans. How we want to see the world, a world where might doesn't make right, or we subscribe to international rules, laws, and norms. We have more in common than we ever had different. We like to get together and drink beer with our friends. You saw that with the veterans, right? And if we just get back to that sometimes, back to my comment of it being par for the course, Josh, it is, because I've been to many of these centers, or many of these veterans engagements, and the human interaction is very much the same. It's actually what gives so much momentum to this relationship right now, is stripped of all the other things. We are so similar in how we want to be as human beings, how we want to treat each other as human beings, how we want to raise our kids. That's easy to make those connections when we let ourselves make those connections. That's what we saw yesterday, Josh, is children around the world are the same. There's almost a certain innocence to some of these children that we deal with disabilities, because they haven't had to, they haven't been maybe a subject, again, some of the 24-hour news cycle and the media push like we talked about before, and so what they're left with at the core is just human beings who get joy out of putting on a musical performance or playing a little basketball with someone who looks a little different to them. And I don't know, it's refreshing. And there's so many more opportunities like that. Unfortunately, the reality is, the other part of that is one of 2 centers in Da Nang, each which can accommodate 45 people, ages 6 to 45. And again, it's a center where families who have children with disabilities can go during the day to get care, to get a bit of vocational training, really to be in a safe place, a safe and loved place, to allow families to go and work and provide for their families. The problem is that's 90 students total in a city where there's thousands and thousands of families who have children with disabilities. And so while a side of me is very happy to be there and it's a joyous occasion, it's also sad because, there's still, going back to your question before, there's so much more that can be done. I guess there's one other tangent I'd like to go on as well, is just when people watch this, sometimes in the back of our minds, we see this, it touches a nerve, and we think, what can I possibly do? I'm 12,000 miles away. I'm just an average person. I don't have a lot of money. What can I possibly do? I can tell you this, anything goes a long way, whether it's a hand-drawn picture that some kid over here gets that makes their day, whether it's $70 for a bicycle for a kid in the village, so they don't have to walk 3 or 4 or 5, 7 miles each way to school, whether it's $1,000 donation to help an American veteran offset costs to be able to come back here for reconciliation to heal their families, whether it's exponentially more to help with more of that stuff on scale, or even to create facilities. If someone's in a corporate setting and able to direct corporate CSR resources towards things like that, anybody can do something at any single level, on a human level, on an individual level, or bigger. And that's another takeaway I'd like to see from some of this. It's just for people to realize that all it takes really is just doing it.
A big thank you to retired Marine Corps Major Chuck Casey for this conversation. And there's also a video version of the conversation. You can find a link to that in the description in this episode of Tomorrowtown, Tennessee. This podcast is a production of NewsChannel 9, Fox Chattanooga, and Sinclair Broadcast Group Chattanooga. I hope you join me again real soon.